Captain Frank Mitchell saw the entire fight from 15,000 feet. He had been leading the top cover element, 4 P-38s orbiting above the engagement as overwatch. Until that morning, Mitchell had always believed the P-38 was simply outclassed by the Zero in a turning fight. That's what every instructor said. That's what every training manual said. That's what the casualty reports showed. But what Mitchell saw below shattered everything he thought he knew. From his altitude, he saw a lone P-38, Hayes's aircraft, roll harder, snap faster, and turn tighter than any lightning he had ever seen. It wasn't just sharper, it was unnatural, almost impossible. He saw Hayes reverse direction like a featherweight boxer slipping a punch. He saw him get inside a Zero's turn radius, something that was considered aerodynamically impossible. Mitchell didn't understand how Hayes was doing it. The reports begin. When Hayes landed, the entire squadron noticed something. He wasn't walking like a man coming home from a mission. He was walking like a man who had seen a miracle. He didn't even remove his flight gloves before approaching McKenna. He just said, "It worked." But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Word spread across the flight line in minutes. Pilots who had watched the fight from altitude started asking questions. Crew chiefs approached Hayes as he climbed out of his cockpit, demanding details before the adrenaline even faded. "Did you change your flaps?" "No." "Did you use combat power?" "Yes, but that's not what did it." "What the hell happened up there?" All Hayes said was, "My airplane finally listened to me." The debrief room. Whoa. 9:35 hours. The debriefing room was hot, noisy, and crowded. Sweat dripped from flight suits. Maps were taped to the walls. 2 intelligence officers were taking notes while half the squadron tried to squeeze inside the doorway. Hayes sat at the center table, still shaking slightly, a canteen of water untouched in front of him. Captain Mitchell walked in, still in his helmet and goggles. He pointed at Hayes and said, "You turned inside a Zero. Explain that." The room went silent. Hayes didn't talk about courage, didn't talk about instincts, didn't talk about fear. He talked about the controls. He said the aircraft responded instantly. Like the delay was gone, like the stick was directly connected to the ailerons with no lag, no play, no slack. Every pilot in the room reacted the same way. They leaned forward. One pilot, Lieutenant Ferris, said, "That's impossible. All the P-38s have slack in the cables. That's how they're built." Hayes shook his head. "Mine didn't. Not today." The engineering officer enters. At 10:07, the squadron engineering officer, Captain Alan Grant, marched into the room. He looked furious. He held a clipboard full of maintenance regulations, the same regulations McKenna had violated the night before. Grant slapped the clipboard onto the table. He said, "Hayes, your airplane's maintenance logs don't show any deviations. Nothing out of tolerance. Nothing changed." Hayes stared back at him. Something changed. Mitchell stepped in. "Sir, with respect, I watched him fight. That aircraft is not stock. I don't know what they did, but it moved like no P-38 I've ever seen." Grant glared at the crew chiefs. "Who worked on Hayes's aircraft last night?" Every mechanic knew the truth. Every mechanic also knew the consequences. Nobody spoke. Grant repeated the question, louder. "Who touched that airplane?" McKenna stepped forward. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like a man walking toward a firing squad. He raised his hand. "I did." The room erupted. Grant pulled McKenna outside the debrief room. The hallway was cramped, hot, the air thick with engine fumes. Grant's voice was cold, controlled, deadly serious. "What did you do?" McKenna told him. "Everything. About the wire, about the slack, about the tension, about the night in the hangar, about the risk, about why he did it." Grant said nothing for a long time. Then he asked only one question. "Did you document the modification?" McKenna shook his head. "Unauthorized flight control modification. Use of non-standard parts. Violation of engineering protocol. Violation of Army Air Force Maintenance Code." Grant listed the infractions like reading charges in a court-martial. McKenna braced himself, but instead of arresting him, Grant exhaled slowly and said, "Show me." At 10:40 a.m., they rolled Hayes's P-38 into the maintenance hangar. McKenna removed the inspection panel. The officers gathered around. Grant crouched, looked inside the boom, and saw the piano wire Z tensioner. He stared at it for almost 30 seconds without speaking. Then he did something nobody expected. He reached out, plucked the cable with his fingers, and listened to the tone. It was tight, perfectly tight, tighter than factory spec, tighter than any P-38 in the squadron. Grant finally whispered, "My God, this is what's been killing our pilots." The room went silent. Every mechanic felt the weight of that sentence. Regulations said the modification was illegal. Reality said the modification had saved a pilot's life and turned the P-38 into the aircraft it was meant to be. Grant stood up, wiped sweat from his forehead, looked at McKenna, and said, "We're installing this on every aircraft." A stunned mechanic asked, "Sir, with engineering approval?" Grant shook his head. "No time. Pilots are dying. We fix them now, and if command wants to court-martial someone, they can start with me." McKenna felt the strength go out of his knees, not from fear, but relief. For the first time in months, he felt like something was changing. Every mechanic in the squadron worked non-stop. They stripped panels off 19 P-38s, measured cable slack, installed tensioners made from anything strong enough, piano wire, scrap steel, even repurposed trim tab springs. Grant ordered the hangar doors locked so inspectors wouldn't wander in. Pilots slept on the floor. Mechanics worked with oil-blackened hands until their knuckles bled. By dusk on the second day, the entire squadron's P-38s had been modified. Not one aircraft had slack in the aileron cables. Every cable sang the same tight, sharp tone when plucked. A tone McKenna recognized instantly. A tone that meant survival. On August 21st, 4 days after Hayes's fight, the Japanese sent 22 Zeros on a raid over the Buna supply corridor. The squadron scrambled 14 P-38s. What happened became known, unofficially, as the 7-minute reversal. For the first time in the Pacific, the P-38s didn't dive in and climb out according to doctrine. They turned, they fought, and they won. 14 P-38s entered the engagement. 13 returned home. The one lost suffered an engine fire. Nothing to do with the controls. The squadron shot down 11 Zeros. Pilots reported the same thing, over and over. No delay, no slack. Instant roll. Aircraft felt light. Controls felt alive. The engineering officer filed a classified report that night titled, "Urgent. Recommend immediate revision of P-38 aileron cable tolerances." It took 6 weeks for the report to reach Lockheed. It took Lockheed 3 days to respond. Their response began with one sentence. Whoever discovered this saved countless lives. By January 1944, Lockheed incorporated McKenna's modification into official design changes. Cable tolerances were tightened. New tensioner brackets were installed on all new production P-38s. Older aircraft were retrofitted across the Pacific. Pilots noticed the difference instantly. Some credited improved training. Some credited new fuel mixtures. Some credited updated tactics. But every mechanic who'd been there in late 1943 knew the truth. It wasn't tactics. It wasn't doctrine. It wasn't training. It was a piece of piano wire bent into a Z shape by a tired, bleeding crew chief who refused to watch one more kid die. The last scene. In March 1944, Hayes found McKenna on the flight line just before sunrise. He handed McKenna a folded piece of paper, a copy of the official Lockheed memo authorizing the new cable tensioning system for all P-38s. At the bottom of the memo was a handwritten note from a Lockheed engineer. To the unnamed crew chief who first did this, you changed the Lightning forever. Hayes looked at McKenna and said, "You didn't just save me, you saved all of us." McKenna didn't reply. He didn't need to. The sound of tight, perfect control cables being plucked across the flight line, one after another, was answer enough.